I'm Seamless, and today I'm going to show you how to make this. More importantly, I'm going to show you the key aspect of how you can kind of apply what's happening with this guy to anything that you do. And I kind of talked about this before when whenever I mention Reese sounds ever. And the idea about this video is basically how to Reeseify anything. So a while ago I had a video that I called the anatomy of a Reese. And basically what happens is that you get phase cancellation between the two voices or more that you're unisoning together, and that creates the rhythmic wobble kind of thing. We have the rhythmic wobble here, but we're not doing it through phase cancellation. We're actually doing it quote unquote manually. So what happens with the rhythmic wobble, if I actually put an EQ in here before the distortion, what happens is that the lowest fundamental, or the fundamental tone, not lowest, there's only one, the lowest tone fades in and out. And when we're doing it traditionally with regular Reese style, where we put two saw waves together, something like that, we're creating phase cancellation, which causes that effect. It causes the lowest tone to phase in and out. So that's what we're doing here, except that what we've done in Citrus is that I've actually separated the lowest tone from everything else, and I am individually phasing it out just through ring modulation. The effect is quite pronounced when we run it through distortion. We run the sound through distortion. We're effectively crushing the sound up against itself. And when the bass is active, that is when the phase is in and it's layered with the other sound, the sound gets rounder for a second and we hear more low end. But then when the bass is phased out, we hear more of the high end. And then it phases in between these two things, and that gets us the Reese wobble. Now, the way that I'm doing this is that I have operator 6 just going straight out. I'll talk about what I did to create the sound of operator 2 and 1 after I'm done explaining this, because this is the main point of the video. So what I've done here is that on the ring modulation matrix, operator 3 is very, very low. It's 0.02. It's extremely low. And I'm lightly ring modulating operator 6 so that it's causing it to go in and out of volume. And because I'm doing this with another oscillator and I'm using a pitch ratio to determine its speed, it will increase with pitch in ratio with everything else. So we get that same Reese quality where higher notes modulate faster than lower notes. And that's a lot of fun. And then when crunched up against the other guy, we get that. That's pretty much all there is to it. So like I say how you could Reeseify anything. Basically what you do is you put a sine wave that's just the lowest tone of the correct note of your bass in with the bass into distortion, and then you one way or another modulate that lowest sine wave. You don't even need to use ring modulation to do that if you don't want. What you can do, another thing you can do if you don't have that kind of power with whatever plugin you decide to use, you can actually still use regular phase cancellation to accomplish this. So if I get rid of 3 and I also write out 5, so now I have 5 and 6, they're both going out. Now if I pitch one differently from the other, we'll get the same phase cancellation. It'll be slightly different, but the effect is still similar. So if like you were using FMA or something, or any other multi-oscillator thingy, and you want it, or even like something separate, like you can make a sound in like Harmor or whatever, and you want to reset, you can just put 2 sine waves together, pitch them slightly apart, and then ram them into distortion with the Harmor patch, and you'll get this effect. That's the one I'm trying to get after for this video. But now I'm going to explain to you how I made the rest of this sound. So I'm going to go back to making this the ring modulation kind. So I took advantage of Citrus's ability to Unison Map stuff. I mentioned this before, but I'll go over what that means again. So on the main page of Citrus, we have the unison order number that tells us how many voices we have. Here I have 8, and notice I don't have any pitch difference. I have phase difference, I have panning, and I have the volume. And what the volume does is it tells us like how loud the other voices are. and the phase, separates them in phase. I felt good. But I'm not using pitch. And this is because I am doing this myself. So over here in the tab in the operator window, we have the Citrus's, way of doing things, which is we have all the parameters and we have all the ways of modifying the parameters. You see over here, I have keyboard mapping engaged for some reason. I don't really know why I did that, but that's interesting. On the dampening, that's weird. Maybe that's default. I've never actually looked at that. Anyway, then at the very end here, we have the uni mapping. And if you look at the uni mapping, we see this grid. There's a grid that we look at that has as many poles as corresponds to the number of voices we've created with Unison. So right now I have 8. Like if I went down to 5, went back here, you see that now there's less. 1, 2, 3, 4. In fact, because I now have 4 voices, not 5 voices. And I have 8. It counts the walls. So the walls are a voice, and then the poles are each individually a voice. So that's why there's 6, and then the walls count 2, and that makes 8. Now what these individual poles represent is this particular parameter's value for that voice. So there's 8 voices, and here I've actually changed the modulation input of operator 1 to be different. And now I've also I put the point in the middle here, and it doesn't actually matter that it's there. The only values that matter are where the line is on these poles. So like the right here is the value that matters for this voice, and right here is the value that matters for that voice. And in the middle, it does not mean anything. And the reason why I made this symmetrical shape is because the panning pans them all symmetrically. So if I made some massive lopsidedness, it would come out lopsided. Like the right side or the left side would sound different, and that wouldn't work out very well. So that's why I did that there. And I changed the mod level for input, which is I'm modulating a saw by another saw, but this saw is an octave higher. This is at 0.5, where the other one is at 0.25. 0.5 being twice 0.25, which creates an octave higher. That's how the world works in ratio land. And then I've also messed with the phase myself to kind of make it fit the way I wanted to. And again, the points in the middle mean nothing. It's the value at the poles that creates the change in setting. So that's how I was able to get a very washy, kind of epic saw feeling. And then I pushed up against the sine wave that's being modulated on and off into distortion. And then I'm also compressing it heavily, just to compress it heavily. This is actually, I guess I should talk about that too. This is actually a preset that came from the Seamless Free 50 that came out recently. So if you want, I'll put the link into that video in the description. So if you want to download this patch, you can get it from there, because that's where it's from, along with a bunch of other ones. So into distortion, and I did some weird things with distortion in this particular patch. So I'm using a patcher to do this, by the way. So I have a Citrus, and then I put the ZQ in here today just so I can show you how that works. And then there's a wave shaper, and then there's a Maximus. So the wave shaper, you can see what's going on. I've made a shape and it sounded cool. With Maximus, however, I'm kind of doing the same thing. I've used the low end compression to bring up the low end so that there be consistent bass. But then in the mid, I've turned off all the time parameters. And this basically turns Maximus into a legit wave shaper. But because this is a multi-band compressor, this effectively turns it into a multi-band wave shaper. So creating this shape does interesting things to the mid frequencies, which I set here. Same deal with the highs, only I've introduced a little bit of attack to take the edge off a bit. And on the master, I have compression on a little bit, plus also soft saturation. So that's pretty much what's up with that. But remember, the whole point of this is all about how these guys interact with each other, with the sine wave, additional sine wave, and the actual thing itself. So remember, you can do this with anything. You can make any sound in any other patch, and then just make a sine wave with the same note, and then modulate the volume of that sine wave against it into the distortion. You can either do that by manually modulating the sine wave, like we did with ring modulation, or you could just put 2 sine waves and pitch them differently, as if you're making a sine wave Reese, and it'll phase in and out, and it'll create the same movement that we have seen here. I prefer the ring modulation just because it gives me more direct control over what I'm doing, and because it just rules. Yeah. Anyway, if you have any questions about any of this, let me know. And as usual, have a nice day.